My name is Amelia, and this is the story of how I reclaimed my life and put an end to my husband George's toxic influence. For the sake of privacy, I'm using pseudonyms. As a prominent lawyer in my state, maintaining anonymity is essential. George and I had a love story that began beautifully but ended in heartbreak. We fell in love, got married, and, eventually, divorced. While I had given my all to the relationship, it became painfully clear that George had not. The signs of infidelity were evident: his avoidance, extended absences, and suspiciously frequent business trips. Despite my success as a lawyer, George belittled me, often comparing his higher income to my own. He saw my career as insignificant and treated me with disdain. One day, during one of his so-called business trips, I decided to investigate. I found his old laptop and uncovered a secret Facebook account. My worst fears were confirmed: he was cheating on me with a woman he found more attractive, someone he openly criticized me for not resembling. Heartbroken but resolute, I confronted him the moment he returned. "George, are you cheating on me?" "I have proof," I declared, my voice shaking. His response was chilling. "Amelia, you're just not that interesting anymore. You're always buried in your cases, and let's face it, you're not exactly a supermodel." His words stung, but I wasn't going to let him gaslight me. "You knew I had a demanding career when we got married," I retorted. "I haven't neglected you, you've been the one avoiding me, shutting me out." George, however, showed no remorse. Instead, he smirked and said, "Good that you found out. I don't have to hide my girlfriend anymore. She and I will have a perfect life together after I divorce you. Finally, I can be with someone who's worthy of me." The audacity of his statement left me stunned. Tears streamed down my face as he belittled me, dismissing my worth as both a wife and a person. "How could you say that, George? I've stood by you through everything, honoring my vows and putting you first." He shrugged coldly. "Doesn't matter anymore. You're not right for me. I've outgrown you." Then came the final blow. "I've already decided to divorce you. I've hired a great lawyer. Move out before I get back, I don't want to see your face." That evening, a friend of George's delivered the divorce papers. With a sympathetic look, they handed them to me. Numb and heartbroken, I shut the door and let the tears flow. But as the pain subsided, it was replaced by something else: determination. I realized I wasn't just a woman scorned, I was a capable lawyer who could fight back. And George had overlooked a critical detail: our prenuptial agreement. If he cheated, I was entitled to half of his business. I immediately called his lawyer, Harry, and set up a meeting. Within 2 days, I moved out of George's house and into my childhood home, which was solely in my name. I texted him, "I've moved out." Took my ugly face with me. "Good luck." George's response was predictably arrogant. He boasted about his lawyer's reputation and scoffed at my decision to stand my ground. But I fired back, "You won't get away with this. From now on, you'll speak to me only through my lawyer." When I finally met with Harry, he initially tried to appear confident, but I could see the cracks in his demeanor. He clearly hadn't anticipated that George's useless wife was a force to be reckoned with. What George and Harry failed to understand was that I wasn't just seeking justice, I was reclaiming my power. My years with George might have been a waste, but I wasn't going to let him rob me of my dignity or what I was owed. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about proving to myself that I was stronger than the betrayal, stronger than the man who tried to break me. And as the legal battle began, I knew one thing for certain: George had underestimated the wrong woman. George never anticipated facing someone like me. In his eyes, I was insignificant, a sentiment he'd carried throughout our marriage. This arrogance trickled down to his lawyer, Harry, who was utterly unprepared for what was about to unfold. When I arrived at the cafe for our meeting, Harry's nervousness was evident. His hands trembled slightly, though I refrained from intimidating him further. After all, he wasn't the root of my predicament. "Hello, Harry. Nice to meet you," I greeted him with a calm demeanor, watching as surprise flashed across his face. "Ma'am. I wasn't expecting you to show up," Harry stammered, clearly flustered. "I imagine not," I replied. "The surnames probably threw you off. I use my maiden name professionally." "That explains it," he muttered, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Harry quickly got to business. "Your husband says you want to drag out this case," he began, attempting to steady his tone. "On the contrary," I interjected. "It's George who wants to prolong this." "Hasn't he told you that?" Harry hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. I leaned forward, speaking deliberately. "You don't need to answer, Harry. I know George better than anyone. I married the man, after all. I know how his mind works." Realizing I had the upper hand, I decided to enlighten him. "Let me save you some time and effort. Did George mention why this divorce is happening? Specifically, that he cheated on me?" Harry's face betrayed his shock. "No, he didn't mention that," he admitted reluctantly. "In fact, he warned me that you'd make baseless accusations just to ruin him." I couldn't help but chuckle. "Oh, poor Harry. George has played you like a fiddle. But don't worry, he thinks you're an excellent lawyer. That's one compliment you can take from him." Harry blushed slightly, then confessed, he never told me his wife was also a lawyer. "He just mentioned you worked at a firm." "George has never taken my accomplishments seriously," I said, my tone turning colder. "But here's what he failed to mention, our prenuptial agreement. It's going to save me a lot of trouble." Harry's face paled. "A prenup," he echoed, clearly blindsided. "Your husband didn't tell me about that. Do you have proof?" I smiled. "Of course. I brought everything with me." I had a feeling George would try to avoid dealing with the consequences of his actions. I handed Harry the documents, including messages, pictures, and the signed prenuptial agreement. He examined them meticulously, growing visibly more deflated with each passing moment. "I see you've got solid evidence," Harry admitted, looking defeated. "I had no idea about any of this." "I figured," I replied. "And I know how difficult it can be to deal with unreliable clients, especially when the opposing party has an equally strong lawyer." Harry nodded, sighing. "You're right. I need to have a serious talk with my client. Someone will contact you soon, but I can't guarantee it will be me." Understanding the implication, I didn't press further. I thanked him for his time and left the cafe, feeling a surge of resolve. The sadness that had lingered since George's betrayal was gone, replaced by a fiery determination. I returned to work and began preparing my own case. George had underestimated me, but he would soon learn that his lies and arrogance had left him cornered. The very next day, George called me, despite my explicit instructions to communicate only through my lawyer. "What the hell did you say to my lawyer, Amelia?" he barked angrily. I couldn't help but laugh. Well. Look who's calling. Didn't you tell me to stay away from you?" "What happened to your lawyer, George?" "Stop playing games, Amelia. Just tell me what you said to him." "He quit today." "Oh, he quit? How sad. Maybe you should have been honest about your situation." The rage in his voice was almost comical. George, who had spent so long underestimating me, was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistakes. And this was just the beginning. George's arrogance had always blinded him to reality, but now, as the walls closed in, desperation was etched across his face. He believed money and bravado could solve everything, but this time, he had met his match. Our conversation began with him threatening to destroy me in court. "You're a nobody, Amelia," he spat angrily over the phone. "I'll hire a better lawyer, and I'll crush you. You'll be begging for mercy." I couldn't help but chuckle at his ignorance. "Well, good luck with that, George," I replied calmly. "But a word of advice, remember to tell your new lawyer about the affair and the prenup. The line went dead as he hung up in frustration, and I laughed quietly. He was in deep trouble, but his ego wouldn't let him admit it, not yet, at least. I knew he'd cycle through every lawyer in town, trying to find someone willing to take on my case. But my reputation preceded me, and the evidence I had would scare off even the most ambitious attorneys. Sure enough, George found himself backed into a corner. One morning, while I was getting ready for work, there was an unexpected knock at my door. I opened it to find him standing there, looking disheveled and defeated. I sighed, stepping aside to let him in. "Make it quick, George. I have better things to do than entertain you." "And weren't we supposed to communicate through lawyers?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "About that. I haven't found a good divorce lawyer yet." "That's unfortunate," I replied with mock sympathy. "You'd better hurry. I hear your mistress is eager to marry you." He waved off the comment. "I'm not worried about her anymore. Listen, Amelia, we need to talk. You've been sabotaging my efforts to hire a lawyer. It's unfair." I burst out laughing at his audacity. "Oh, George. Sabotaging you? That's rich. The only one sabotaging you is yourself. You lied to your lawyers about the affair and the prenup. Did you really think they wouldn't figure it out? No reputable lawyer is going to represent someone as unreliable as you." George's face flushed. "I've tried being honest with them, too, but it doesn't matter. None of them want to take my case." "Exactly," I replied, my tone turning icy. "That's what happens when you cheat and try to wriggle out of an ironclad prenup. You thought you could drag this divorce out long enough for me to give up and walk away without demanding my rightful share of your business. But guess what? That plan failed." His expression darkened, the weight of his predicament sinking in. After a long pause, he did something I never thought I'd see. He broke down, tears streaming down his face. "Amelia," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "You know how much this business means to me. Please don't take it away. Take everything else, but not the business. I'm begging you." I folded my arms, unmoved. "Why not, George? You're the one who included the clause about splitting the business in case of infidelity. Did you think I'd just ignore it? I deserve what's mine, especially after the betrayal you threw in my face." "It was a mistake," he insisted. "I've put my relationship with her on hold. Maybe we can give our marriage another try. This could make us stronger." I laughed out loud, the sheer absurdity of his suggestion catching me off guard. "You must be delusional. Do you really think I'm that stupid? I know you're only saying this because you don't want to split your business. We were happy together once," he said weakly, trying to sound sincere. "Let's just move past this, Amelia. One mistake shouldn't ruin everything." But his words rang hollow. I saw right through him. This wasn't about love or regret. It was about greed and desperation. "George," I said firmly, "there's no going back. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. You'll give me what's mine, and then you'll be free to marry whoever you want. That's the deal." As I watched him crumble, I felt no pity. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. For years, he had dismissed my worth, undermined my achievements, and taken me for granted. Now, he had to face the reality he had created. And I wasn't going to let him off the hook. When George came to me, pleading to save our marriage, it was almost laughable. His promises to cut off his mistress and start anew were hollow. "There's no reason to do that, George," I told him, my tone calm but firm. "That woman will run for the hills the moment she realizes you won't be wealthy after this divorce. And as for me, this is my golden opportunity to walk away from this sham of a marriage. I'm just thankful you showed your true colors before we had children." His begging and bargaining continued, but I was done. Every tear he shed, every desperate word he uttered, only served as poetic justice for the nights I spent crying myself to sleep because of his betrayal. Watching him so vulnerable now didn't break me, it empowered me. This was my closure, my victory, and my clean break. Karma, as it turned out, didn't waste time catching up with George. For weeks, he tried to change my mind, sending messages, making calls, even showing up uninvited. I ignored it all. I had no interest in his drama or his empty apologies. I was ready to move forward. Since George had already filed for divorce, I hired a colleague from my firm to represent me. I'm not a divorce lawyer, and I wanted to minimize direct interaction with him. After a month of failed attempts to reconcile, he finally gave up. He realized that dragging the case to court would only bring him public humiliation and unnecessary expenses. Begrudgingly, he agreed to a mutual split. The ironclad prenup made the process swift and straightforward. With substantial evidence of his infidelity, the agreement entitled me to half of his business. George hated it, but there was no escape. He signed over half of his company, knowing he had no other choice. We even offered him a chance to buy me out, but George had no money left. Why? Because he had squandered it on his mistress. Ironically, she was no longer answering his calls or texts. The moment she realized he wouldn't be rich anymore, she disappeared. And now, no one wanted to date her either. Her reputation as a gold digger had spread far and wide. But George's problems didn't stop there. With his income halved, he couldn't maintain the lavish lifestyle he once flaunted. He had to sell his mansion and now rents a modest condo, a far cry from the luxury he once enjoyed. Still, he tried one last time to get back with me, hoping to regain full control of his business. Safe to say, that's never going to happen. George now faces two options: continue managing his diminished share or somehow save enough money to buy me out. As for me, life has never been better. I hired a competent manager to oversee my share of the business, and the results have been phenomenal. Combined with my successful law career, I was able to upgrade my lifestyle significantly. I purchased a beautiful new mansion, and every day feels like a fresh start. The divorce wasn't just a closure, it was a turning point. I refused to be played by my ex-husband and his mistress. Instead, I turned the tables, claiming what was rightfully mine and securing a brighter future for myself. I'm thriving, and honestly, I couldn't be happier. What goes around truly comes around.